Now, in 1986, electromagnetic frequency applications were already very, very much under development. And let's see, I'm just trying to find 1986. Oh, here it is. This is the statement of Captain Paul E. Tyler, U.S. Navy. Quote, using relatively low-level RFR, it may be possible to sensitize large military groups to extremely dispersed amounts of biological or chemical agents to which the unirradiated population would be immune. Now, the permeability of the blood-brain barrier could be increased with certain pulsed microwave beams and an additional weapon which would enhance the effects of drugs, bacteria, or poisons. And so today we have these chemtrails that are being sprayed into the skies over NATO countries, but also non-NATO countries. And on the ground, there are pesticide spraying programs which are synchronized with the chemtrails. And I believe this is a binary weapon. In other words, the chemtrails are one component, and the chemicals are a different component. And when you put them together or synchronize them, they multiply the effects of each other. And the chemtrails are part of the HAARP system. And I just came back from Canada and saw photographs of chemtrails. They're usually white. But in these photos in Canada, over British Columbia, they had also sprayed the black ones at the same time. And the citizens told me they smelled like diesel or pesticides. So right now in the San Francisco Bay Area, the state of California, the Food and Drug, the Director of Food and Drug, Food and Agriculture, has announced that his name is Leuren Moret. He wants to spray the entire San Francisco Bay Area for at least 5.5 years with a pesticide that is called Checkmate, without any epidemiology studies on the after effects, without any demonstrated harm to agricultural crops from the target insect, which is the brown apple moth. And this is obviously a binary weapon system to sterilize and diminish fertility, as well as damage biologically the population here in other ways. And it's really very frightening. It's just very frightening. Now, this HAARP system has also, it does have other applications. And the HAARP spokesperson, Rich Garcia, in a film clip that's on your website, Alfred, you might like to say where it is.
You mean the article with the HAARP?
With the background for tonight's talk.
Yes, right. Well, if people go to www.peaceinspace.org, you will see there an article entitled HAARP is a space-based weapon of mass destruction and must be banned by treaty. And just click on that article, and a complete series of links and explanations of the background, including videos of the background of much of what we're talking about during this program, will be available to you. That's www.peaceinspace.org.
Now, in 1992, this was published in the, let's see, where was it published? Well, it's a quote from General Ashey, Commander U.S. Air Force Space Command, and Commander-in-Chief of the combined U.S.-Canada North American Air Defense Command, that's NORAD, on August 5, 1996, he announced, quote, "We'll expand into these two missions, Space Control and Space Force Application, because they will become increasingly important. We will engage terrestrial targets someday, ships, airplanes, land targets from space." And this is in the U.S. Space Command 2020 vision sanctioned by Congress. He also said, "We will engage targets in space from space, and this command will engage quickly. The missions are already assigned, and we've written the concepts of operations. We will engage re-entry vehicles in the medium of space with a ballistic missile defense system of North America. It's politically sensitive, but it's going to happen. Some people don't want to hear this, and it sure isn't in vogue. But absolutely, we're going to fight in space." And so the first example that I can think of that I've identified as a scientist for the last 40 years was the Kobe earthquake, which was a 7.3 earthquake at 5:46 a.m., January 17, 1995. And this occurred in Kobe, Japan, early in the morning. Many people were killed, injured, and they had actually had a warning at least 24 hours before the earthquake, or maybe a few hours, enough to evacuate people, but nothing was done. Now, I'm a geoscientist, and seismologist friends of mine told me after that earthquake that it was deliberately triggered by the U.S. military, and that it was for the purpose of establishing a seismic network around Taiwan and Japan in order to spy on China. And he said, well, it is for military applications, but we don't really care because it's a new toy for us to study earthquakes with. And, of course, at that time, I didn't realize that there was such a thing as HAARP, and I had no idea what he was talking about, but I sure did remember that. And then in 2005, we had Hurricane Katrina, which was the first really obviously engineered disaster. And I'd just like to read what FEMA announced, their prediction on September 10th, 2001. FEMA predicted 3 most likely and deadly disasters that could befall the United States. These were, number 1, a terrorist attack on New York. Number 2, an earthquake in San Francisco. Number 3, a hurricane in New Orleans. And the very next day, on 9/11, the World Trade Center buildings and the Pentagon disaster occurred. Now, how would FEMA be able to have such a good disaster record, and when is this earthquake disaster going to occur in San Francisco? I don't know.
Yeah. If I could just jump in there for a second. If we're talking about the terrorist attack in New York, i.e. the false flag operation of September 11, 2001, an earthquake in San Francisco, which has not occurred yet, and the Katrina, the Katrina event appears to have been a HAARP-induced event. This argues circumstantially then and reinforces the fact that the attack on the World Trade Center, on that false flag operation, that the disintegration of the 2 World Trade Center towers was in fact done by HAARP. And that appears to be within the technical capabilities of HAARP, one of which is, and I want to quote here, scalar energy warfare against land and population targets, including cities, industrial sites, building populations, and individuals.
Well, let's go back to the HAARP spokesperson, Rich Garcia, and how he described HAARP, the HAARP system. He said it can be used for, it was intended to be used by the Navy and Air Force for missile defense and for communications disruption. But I'd like to read something from a quote from, this is from the National Industrial Security Program Manual, draft, March 1992, provided by U.S. Department of Defense for industrial contractors. And what this manual said is, quote, cover stories about projects must be believable and cannot reveal any information regarding the true nature of the project. So the cover story, I believe, for HAARP is national missile defense. But when you look at what Mr. Garcia said about other applications, he also mentioned weather modification, where you can, I'm just explaining how they do it because I'm a geoscientist. They can direct beams into an earthquake zone, and they can heat up the pressure zones and pop the earthquake. It sounds quite incredible, but there are other applications for these beams, such as subterranean exploration for oil. And in the video clip that you have on your website, Brooks Agnew, who I guess he's a seismologist, stated that he was doing radiotomography, which is looking at subsurface structures, in 1983 with a 30-watt beam, and he identified 26 producing oil wells, or wells that produced after they were drilled, in 9 states with 100% accuracy. And this system is so accurate that they have identified frequencies for each substance they're looking for, whether it's oil deposits, natural gas deposits, or deposits. They don't even need really to do exploration the way they used to. They can do it all from space. So there is definitely a very, very strong economic component to the HAARP system. Triggering earthquakes, they can also do that by inducing vibrations underground that finally destabilize the earthquake zone. And that would be for economic or military or political applications, and we'll go over those in a minute. But also, there are rogue waves. These are huge waves, 15 or 20 feet high, that have been reported in the Atlantic and the Pacific. And I sort of noticed these about 5 years ago. I read a couple of reports on them, and they can just sink a ship immediately. A smaller one was in Hawaii, and it was used to at a picnic to identify and to cause the death of a researcher at the University of Hawaii who was very, very opposed to genetically modifying taro, which is what the native Hawaiians and many Pacific Islanders eat. Now, why would Monsanto want to genetically modify a food type in Hawaii that only maybe 5,000 people ate? There isn't any economic benefit to that, but if genetically modified food and organisms are doing what people believe they're doing, which is they're a biological weapon also,